Good morning, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation at Shelter Rock. I'm the Reverend Natalie Fenimore, and I serve in ministry along with the Reverend Ned White and the Reverend Jennifer Brower and our ministerial intern, Nancy Reed McKee. You will not see Jennifer today. She is on sabbatical, and Ned is somewhere here. Up there. There he is, the balcony. He's a balcony sitter today. Take a moment after this service to look over the announcements that you'll find in your order of service. You'll see that we're a very busy congregation with a lot of things that you might potentially do. We don't ask that you do all of them at once or all of them right away, but find something that speaks to your heart and to your mind and give it a try. It's the best way to get to know this community and to get to know a little bit more about yourself and your relationship to Unitarian Universalism. Please join us for lunch in the UU Cafe after the service in our social hall. We have lunch each Sunday. If you are a visitor, please go to our welcome desk in the lobby and receive a visitor card, which will entitle you to a free lunch today, because there is such a thing as a free lunch from time to time. It's a great time to sit in the social hall and have some conversation and meet our wonderful people and learn more about this community of faith. I now invite you to sing happy birthday to the Reverend Ned White. Not to have a birthday on the weekend. Thank you, Ned. And now an announcement from our Veatch chair of the Veatch Board of Governors.
Hard to top that birthday song. Good morning. I'm Carol Alexander. I'm the chair of the Veatch Board of Governors, and I welcome you this morning to Veatch Sunday. How lucky am I to share the work of the Veatch program with all of you? And how lucky are all of us to be able to support the amazing work of this program? Thank you for your steadfastness. The Veatch program has come to be highly regarded in progressive philanthropy. Some say we set the standards. On special days like today, we get to meet some of our amazing grantees. They're the ones who make our UU values a reality. They're the ones who fight every day to make being a human being a sufficient reason to have a good life. It's truly a calling. The Veatch program has been at the heart of this congregation for nearly 60 years. We have over 180 grantees who are building movements to give a voice to those that don't have one, the most vulnerable in our communities. 1/3 of the grants go to the UU denomination. They go to 15 different UU organizations, such as the Service Committee, Church of the Larger Fellowship. Last year, our theme was on solid ground. A new administration had come into office, threatening many of the advances that had been hard-won over the previous years. Our grantees were quite fearful. There was a lot of fear at the time, and we needed to stand by them. This year, our theme is, we resist, we rise. We stood firm with them, and we're pleased to say that we see hope. We've resisted, and we've had successes. Leaders have become bolder, more individuals have been energized, The fight isn't over by any means, but we're meeting the challenge. We've seen our strength, we are heartened, and we see a better future. I hope you enjoy the program today, and now I'm going to introduce the Executive Director of the Veatch program, who's going to tell you more about the grantees, Joe Minieri.
Thank you, Carol. We have with us today Taj James, who will deliver the sermon. Taj is the founder and the co-director of the Movement Strategy Center. It's a longtime Veatch grantee based in Oakland, California. Taj's organization is a hub for collaboration among social justice leaders. For almost 2 decades, the Movement Strategy Center has served as a resource for organizers and leaders, including many Veatch grantees, to strengthen their skills and strategies and to make lasting social and political change. Taj's commitment to bringing out the fullest capacity of each person and of whole communities allows for the generosity and abundance within to emerge and to make a difference. Following the service in the social hall, Taj will facilitate a panel discussion with Veatch grantees Maria Rodriguez of the Florida Immigrant Coalition, Kris Hayashi of the Transgender Law Center, and Christine Nuemann-Ortiz of Voces de la Frontera. I would like to express our deepest gratitude to Taj, Maria, Kris, and Christine for taking time away from their families and their work in their communities to be with us this weekend. We hope you will all join us in the social hall after service to learn more about the ways that they're putting UU values into action. Thank you.
I'm Klaus Masich, president of UUCSR, and as is our tradition, I would invite you to greet your neighbors. However, in light of the flu season, I would suggest that you might want to use the Buddhist greeting.
These are the words of William Schulz, former head of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, of each grantee that supports human rights worldwide. Come into this place of peace and let its silence heal you, heal your spirit. Come into this place of memory and let its history warm your soul. Come into this place of prophecy and power and let its vision change your heart. Please rise in body and spirit to sing hymn number 1074 in the Teal hymnals entitled Turn the World Around.
Please remain standing for the words and songs of affirmation that are printed in your order of service. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve human need. This we return and covenant with each other.
I hope you'll join us singing this next song. The words are in the chorus: together we can move mountains, Alone, we can't move at all. Together, we can move mountains. Alone, we can't move at all.
Now the ones who get rich while we scrape to get by know our unity means their defeat, so they set us against one another, sister and brother, color against color, keeping us weak, they're keeping us weak. But together we can move mountains.
From the smallest seed, mighty tree can grow with its roots planted firmly in the ground. Reach for the sun, only then will you know all the love and the beauty in this life to be found.
We will now receive our offering for the Solidarity Fund of Long Island Jobs with Justice, a local Veatch grantee. Our Social Justice Committee and members of other faith communities work with Jobs with Justice to support low-wage workers, many of whom are immigrants, who are increasingly vulnerable to deportation. Two examples of their support are, firstly, Jobs with Justice trains volunteers, including 8 members of this congregation, to accompany immigrants to check-ins and court appearances. Secondly, if a worker receives an order for immediate deportation, Jobs with Justice provides financial assistance for the family through the Solidarity Fund. The trained volunteers and the financial resources from the Solidarity Fund bear witness to community support for immigrant workers. In this way, they help us to live our faith commitment to the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Please see the order of service for more information about how to support this offering. Will the ushers please come forward?
the words of the Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh, Buddhist teacher and renowned peacemaker, let us be at peace with our bodies and our minds. Let us return to ourselves and become wholly ourselves. Let us be aware of the source of being, common to all of us and all living things. Evoking the presence of great compassion, let us fill our hearts and our own compassion towards ourselves and towards all living beings. Let us pray that we ourselves cease to be the cause of suffering to each other, with humility, with awareness of the existence of life and the suffering that is going on all around us. Let us practice the establishment of peace in our hearts and on the earth. Amen.
And now, in the spirit of the reading, I invite you to come forward to light a candle of joy or sorrow, memory or hope, using either of our two candle boxes. The light of these candles before us speak in silence of the great emotions of our lives, the many hopes and dreams, the joys and pain present in our lives, in this room, in this world. May we be comforted by being together in this light. Let us sit in silence with this, our own great light. Spirit of life and love, who we call by many names, be with us in our times of celebration and sorrow. Help us to know that we are of one body, living together on one earth, more alike than not alike, and infinitely needful of one another. Let us practice love and compassion in our hearts and work for peace and justice in this world, knowing at our core that we can do nothing else if we are to survive, if we are to prosper. We must know love or we must die. Let us choose life. Let us choose love. Let us choose compassion. Let us choose purpose. Let us choose, in the end, one another in order to become ourselves. May it be so. Amen.
You're broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can find a fire, and I see it in you, so we gon' work it out. Ooh, mountain. I'll rise unafraid, I'll rise up, and I do it 1,000 times again.
These are the words of the 19th century black abolitionist Frederick Douglass. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are people who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its waters. This struggle must be a moral one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out what people will submit to, and you have found out the exact amount of injustice which will be imposed upon them. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress.
Please open your minds and hearts to the words of Taj James.
The love in this room is, it's so palpable I can almost reach out and touch it. I am honored and moved to be with you this morning, and for the opportunity to feel the beating heart of love that this community is, and realizing it's a well from which I've been drawing energy and support and resources in ways that I did not realize until this moment. So, so grateful to be with you and to be exploring some of the toughest questions. And for me, the toughest question has always been the one that the song invited us into. And not just, do you know who I am, but do I know who I am? And do I know who you are? Because I have a suspicion that most of the difficulties we're struggling with are rooted in our inability to see clearly who we are and who each other is. And I'm honored and grateful to be connected to communities who are doing the sacred work of helping us to remember who we are, helping us to remember how we're connected, and how I can't be who I am until you're able to be fully who you are. And that's the truth of who we are. And so this community is a living embodiment of that truth and that practice, and the communities that you support, that I'm a part of, are with you in that question and with you in that exploration. It was the celebration of Dr. King's birthday not that long ago, and one of the things that people forget is that during the height of the civil rights movement, the moment in which this country was reckoning with the promise of who it had been and who it might be, but during that time, only about 20% of the people in this country actually supported the movement. So think about that for a second. This is a movement and leaders from this movement who we celebrate. But at the time that these questions were being confronted, when the violence that was holding this system together was in full display for all the world to see on their TV screens or maybe in their front yards, only a small percentage of the country actually supported the movement. And yet, that movement transformed us all. And now, we all celebrate it. So part of the mystery of understanding who we are is about healing our relationship to time. Healing our relationship to time. And what I mean by that is understanding what is really important or significant about this very moment, the moment that we're in right now. And there are a special group of people who have almost a superpower, and it's the ability to know what is required in the moment and to have the courage to meet it. And I count you and the organizations that you support and the communities that you support as among those who understand the importance and the sacredness of the moment and what's required. And this moment that we're living in right now, in some ways, is a moment that comes maybe almost every 500 years. It's a 500-year moment. It's the moment in which a story that was told that disconnected us from each other and from ourselves. That story, it grew and it spread and it gave birth to creative destruction. And one of the things that was sacrificed in that story was our very human dignity. Because that story was what I think of as the lie of separation. A story that separated humanity from itself. And part of what is so painful about this moment is that story is dying. Painfully and violently so, but it's coming to an end. And a new story is emerging. And at the center of that story are the understanding and the recognition and the values that are at the center of this community. The recognition that we are one, that we are connected, a single human family, and that our fate and destiny is inescapably linked. And we're at a moment in our history when we have to live into the truth of that, or the future of humanity will be short. Sometimes I think about it as like we'll leave the party a little early if we don't come to terms with the truth of who we are, because that's the situation we've created for ourselves. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey in that question, and I just want to thank and appreciate you for, as one of the leaders who's not here but who you supported, Christina from United We Dream, shared with this community some time ago, that honoring what Frederick Douglass has spoken to us, that it's time for our country to take a stand against racism, to see our humanity and to take a side. And I want to thank you for being on the side of humanity and standing against racism, for being on the side of humanity and standing against hatred and greed and violence, for being on the side of humanity and standing with those who are defending Mother Earth and the web of life, the water protectors and the wisdom keepers. And I want to thank you for not succumbing to the despair, the cynicism that these difficult times can bring us to, but to come back to the truth and the possibility and the potential of who we are and the hope. So, I'm really happy it's 2018. In 2017, me and some other people kind of had a feeling about what might happen in an election that we had a little while ago. And unfortunately, we were right. And when it was election night and I was with my children and we were watching the events come in, and I shared with them that I kind of knew what was going to happen, my 13-year-old daughter said, okay, wait a minute, Dad. So you're telling me that you knew what was going to happen, so why didn't you go to the Rust Belt and do something about it? So basically, this is your fault. And I thought about that for a second, and I said, you know what? I think you're right. I knew what was going to happen, and I didn't do everything that I could, right? And that really sat with me. So, and then I knew if I didn't do something about it, both my kids would be pretty upset. So I woke up this morning. I woke up the next morning, and in my moments of despair, when I'm trying to find my way back to hope, I write. And so this is what I wrote and shared. The invitation has arrived to step into our courage and full humanity. From this day forward, the harm can only unfold and multiply and spread with our silence, with our consent, with our participation. And we will not be silent, we do not consent, we will not participate in legitimating violence, lies, and division. We claim and assert the only true power, the love that we are, the love that connects us all, the love that bends history, even in this dark moment, towards liberation. The time has come to live love without fear and hesitation, no matter the price. We are one, and we are many, and we are one. And it is time, dear friends, the revolution of love must be completed. And it is only possible on this day if we commit ourselves to walking the hard road, because now there is only one way forward: love. So the other thing I did was I created a petition for people to commit to registering as a Muslim if the government decided to create a Muslim registry. So those were the two things I did on election morning, and then proceeded to try to figure out what's my little contribution to what we know was going to unfold. And a little bit of the struggle that I had was, it was very predictable on that day who amongst us in our communities would be targeted for harm. And very aware that the kind of harm that was going to unfold in order to interrupt that harm, requires a tremendous amount of courage. Courage mostly on the part of those who are facing it, but also courage on the part of those of us who have a choice about whether we stay inside or whether we stand with those, place our bodies next to those who are facing that harm and that violence. And my children, their mothers, Japanese American, so their family members had the experience of spending time in internment camps. And I was thinking about like how that happened. And what I realized, as Dr. King reminded us, that it wasn't really about, as with the violence of the civil rights movement that people experienced, it wasn't really about the direct violence of the extremists. It was really about the silence and the inaction of our friends, that the majority stood by and watched as their neighbors were taken from their homes and put in camps, and the majority of neighbors watched as some bodies were visited with violence and others stood by and did nothing. And so I was sitting with, personally, what is my responsibility, knowing what is going to happen. And it was a little bit of a struggle and a crisis. And to be frank, I was balancing my responsibility to my children and the responsibility to stand with those who were going to do harm, and I didn't quite know what to do. So I had to seek help, and I realized there was no way for me to answer that question alone, and I had to think about my ancestors and all the people who had sacrificed so that I could be where I am with the ability to do what I can do, and what would they ask of me. And I also thought about my descendants, the people who are going to come after us, who are depending on us in this moment to do something very critical. And it was clear to me that this is a moment in which the choices that we make now aren't just affecting the lives of the people who live in this moment and our children and grandchildren, but may shape the direction of the next 100 years, the next 500 years, that we're in a moment in between the collapse of an old story, the collapse of an old world, and the birth of a new one. And the question is, in this new world, can the values that are at the center of this community, can those be the values of the world we build, and not just what we experience when we come into sanctuary, when we come into community? And then we leave this place, and human dignity is hard to find. It's hard to find. It's hard to find places where it is honored in a sacred way. So what is required of us in this moment, in this opportunity in which the future is uncertain, to determine the course of history? So Dr. King also reminded us that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But it's important for us to remember that it doesn't bend on its own, that it was the sacrifice, and is the sacrifice, and the courage of everyday people standing up for human dignity that bends the arc. And so I realized that in some ways that small group of people who put their bodies on the line in the civil rights movement, who generated the support of 24% of the population that then transformed the nation, right? That this business of bending the arc is really the courageous burden of those who know who they are. It is the courageous burden of those who know who they are, and whether we have the strength to live into the truth of that. And that is the moment we're in. And being in this community, I can say with confidence that I am amongst the arc benders. That you are all in your own way, large and small, doing part of the sacred work of bending this arc. And this community and this congregation has a very special role to play in generating change at a level that we will only know looking back upon it. Who are the people who had the courage to stand up? And now when we imagine a future in which the values that are upholded here are upholded everywhere we go, and people wonder how that happened. Right? It's because there were people who came together to share their joys and sorrows and to stand with each other as they go to meet the immigration services, to provide support and protection. That this is a community that knew who it was and knows who we are. And so I want to thank you for that, for being the benders of the arc. And the thing I want to say about this process of transition and transformation, again, going back to Dr. King, it's what he called the revolution in values. And he named at the time that we were shifting from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society. And that we had to move beyond militarism and racism and economic exploitation in order to transition and transform into a world organized around beloved community, around love and care and community. And in the work of the organizations that this congregation supports, they're the people who are confronting that racism and that militarism and that economic exploitation. And their response always is love. It's always love. They are showing us how to care for ourselves and care for each other in a way that all are included. And so by standing with those who are most at risk, the possibility for liberation for all of us is realized. And the other thing that's exciting and terrifying about this moment is that what we do as human beings, the little things and the small things, they always matter. Everything that we do matters because we're all interconnected. And so we affect each other and impact each other in ways that we realize and ways that we don't. But this is a moment in history in which what we do matters in an even more profound way, because it will determine which path we take. It will determine whether or not this new world that is emerging is actually able to come to life. And so the important thing for us to remember is the amount of courage we can muster in this moment is directly related to two things. The amount of suffering that people will experience during this process of transition, and how quickly and beautifully we can build something better than we've ever had before. Right? Those are the two things. And it all depends on the arc benders and how much courage we can muster. So I think when I was scolded by my daughter, part of what I realized, part of what I had to ask myself was frankly, if I don't live through the next year, is that worth it? And I basically woke up on the morning after the election and said, it's worth it. If this is my last year on the earth, it'll be worth it, because now is the time that matters. Now is the time that matters. And I still feel that in every sense of my being. And again, that's always true, but it's particularly true right now because of the ways that people are experiencing harm. And as you'll hear later on, the beautiful resistance is growing and building and rising. And that is why the suffering that people experienced over the last year was nowhere as severe as it could be. As severe as it was, the resistance has been beautiful and overwhelmingly beautiful. Humanity is flowering, right? So we have a small number of people generating a large amount of harm, and the rest of us are waking up and stepping forward and starting to say, enough, enough, enough. There is a better way. There's a different way. We can move forward in a way where all of us can thrive. That is possible if we come into right relationship. So what if we pledged allegiance to our human family? What if we pledged our allegiance to our human family? What if in every schoolroom around the country that was how we started our day, right? Because when I think about who I am, there's this question of who I am first, and part of what's happening right now is an untangling of a little confusion. One of the folks in the community I was speaking with last night was remarking on how odd it seems that some communities of Christians seem to really like what this current administration is doing. And they were noting sort of this seeming contradiction in that, right? How could you be excited about this violence and hate and depravity as someone who claims a relationship to light? And what it made me realize is that really there's who we say we are and who we really are, right? And for those folks, they are white first and Christian second, right? So when and that's why I say pledge allegiance to our human family, right? I'm a dad first, second, third, and fourth. And what that means is I have great compassion for every other parent who has to raise their kids and figure out how to help them live in this world. And everyone who's had a parent, which means I'm a human being first. And that's where my allegiance and my duty and responsibility is to my human family. And the question for me is how do I live in a way where that is always first? Which means other things have to come second, third, and fourth. And so part of the revolution of this moment, part of what this 500-year cycle is about, is that this about 500 years ago, this lie of separation, this story about how we are not one, it took a particular form which didn't exist before, called race. And this thing called race created this thing called whiteness, which didn't exist before. That story has created some challenges. And so this is I'm gonna share another piece about some of my understanding of this, and then we'll see where that takes us. You are strong, not fragile. You are not your whiteness. It's just a blindfold. Take it off. You're already a part of the human family. Take it off. Stand with us, eyes open. Don't hesitate or delay. You may be driving the car, unable to see. Your child has just stepped into the street. You may be holding the gun, unable to see. Your sister looking up the barrel. You may be clutching the purse, unable to see. A bag full of coin, dug by other hands, so heavy on your chest, you cannot breathe. A piece of fabric cannot die. but it can strangle humanity's last breath. You may not have noticed, but the blindfold has slipped down around the neck of your children. A noose of blinding lies and comfort and entitlement that disconnects you from your true power, the power to connect, to breathe, to repair, to do your part, to mend the sacred hoop. Take it off. Treason to learned blindness is loyalty to the survival of humanity. Treason to whiteness is loyalty to humanity. Take it off. Human dignity and whiteness cannot coexist because it is the lie that was created to deny humanity to so many and separate those who from their own humanity. So the possibility of this transformation is what one of my mentors called out of the death of race becomes possible the birth of the human. The birth of the human and the birth of a global human community in which we can honor the dignity of all people. And it's been a painful process, and it will continue to be, but it feels unstoppable, and I appreciate the way that this community is struggling with that question and leading in relationship to that question, so that liberation for all of us is possible. So the last thing I want to leave you with is what I think is sort of the central practice to guide us through this transitional period. And it's really the practice of recognizing fundamental abundance. So in moments of disconnection and breakdown and uncertainty, as human beings that can often bring us into isolation, into fear, into a sense of scarcity, that there's not enough. There's not enough time, there's not enough resources, there's not enough. And my guess is, to get where we need to go, we have to have awareness of when we are in that state and figure out through our faith, through our practice, through our relationships, to reconnect to other people and to reconnect to a sense of abundance and hope and possibility. Because what is fundamentally true is that there is more than enough love, there's more than enough of everything we need for all of us to thrive. And in moments when we find ourselves unable to recognize it, unable to connect to it, who are the people who can reach out to? Whose embrace will remind us that together we can do anything, and alone, nothing. Right? It is that simple. In our fellowship, in our congregation, in our relationship, we have everything that we need. And so, in addition to the courage of the Archbenders, our connection and relationship to abundance is the other essential element to guide us through this difficult transition. And your continued support and embrace and solidarity and standing with, in all the ways that you do, the communities you support through the Veatch program is driving a transformational process that is unstoppable, indomitable, unbreakable. We can't lose. Because regardless of what may unfold, where there's breath, there's hope. And where there's breath, there's life. And as long as there's one of us left breathing, there is possibility. The future can still emerge. And so, much gratitude for your love, for the ways that you bring the values of this community to life, not just here, but in everywhere you go. And for your song. Thank you.
mind and body or spirit for our closing hymn, number 1028, The Fire of Commitment, in the teal hymnal.
Our closing words from the first book of Corinthians in the Christian Bible. Keep alert, stand firm in your faith, be courageous, be strong. Let all that you do be done in love.